This video presents 3 true stories of caving accidents. The first is of a horrific accident and truly disgusting injury that will make you cringe. The second is of a headstrong military instructor that leads soldiers into disaster only to have one of them accomplish a feat that no human had ever done before and no one has done since. The third is such a strange and unexpected accident, no one will see it coming. This is True Tragedies. On January 4th, 1975, 4 friends decided to explore Case Cave in Georgia. This is not a particularly difficult cave, but every cave has its own set of obstacles. This particular cave has a 30-foot vertical shaft that must be rappelled to enter. However, in 1975, an iron ladder had been secured in the entrance, allowing any novice to enter the cave unsupervised. This led to many curious explorers entering the cave without knowing the dangers or having the proper equipment. Furthermore, this cave has a network of passages where any person lacking knowledge of this particular cave could easily become lost. On January 4th, 1975, this group of 4 friends entered the cave by the iron ladder. They were extremely inexperienced, including a 23-year-old that had never been in a cave before. Her name was Gwen Place. They were also not dressed for the occasion, wearing their standard clothing, and in the case of Gwen, wearing boots. However, at this time, street clothes were regularly worn into this cave as it was completely open to anyone and wasn't monitored in any way. After descending the ladder, they arrived in the main shaft, which split off into several different directions, but provided only a single path to the main part of the cave. They followed the narrow passage to the crossroads, where they continued on to the moon room. At the moon room, the cave opens up into a large room. From the moon room, the group continued on exploring various adjoining passages. Soon they came to a path over a sloped rock, with an edge at the end of the rock and only darkness below. The group began to cross, one by one, at the top of the rock. With her boots now covered in mud, Gwen moved out onto the rock. On the slick, smooth rock surface, Gwen slipped and began sliding down the rock face toward the edge of the cliff, not knowing what lay below. She tried to grab a hold of the rock, but it was a smooth surface. There was nothing to grab onto. She slid 10 feet down the rock face, but within inches of sliding over the edge, she suddenly stopped and screamed as blinding pain shot through her leg. The fall was stopped when her foot and lower leg found a crack in the rock face. Her body slid over the crack with her lower leg getting stuck. With nearly the full weight of her body being forced onto her leg, it snapped. This caused both the tibia and the fibula to break, resulting in a compound fracture, with the bones severing the skin in Gwen's leg. Her slide was halted inches from the edge of the cliff only by the remaining tissue of her leg. In a matter of seconds, she went from having fun with her friends exploring a cave for the first time to inches from a 30-foot cliff, being held up by her foot stuck in a crack with 4 inches of bone sticking out of her leg. A group of more experienced cavers heard the fall and came to help. One of the friends, along with several other cavers from the adjoining group, carefully descended the rock to secure Gwen and provide comfort while the 2 others in the group went for help. The Dade County Civil Defense was contacted at 7:05 and arrived at the cave within 10 minutes. After gathering their equipment, they entered the cave at 7:30 p.m. The 2 friends attempted to lead the medical rescue team to Gwen, but in the rush to exit, they did not take note of their surroundings. They led the rescue team astray, as they did not know where in the cave the incident had occurred. Eventually, after wasting precious time, they found Gwen. The medical team secured her brake in an air splint, then placed her in a rescue litter and carried her out of the cave. They made it out of the cave and arrived at the local hospital around midnight. The medical team even commented that she must have been terrified and in extreme pain, but Gwen did not go into severe shock and was very resilient once the splint was on, making the rescue seamless and efficient. Gwen went on to make a full recovery. On July 7, 1965, an Army instructor took 8 young soldiers to the Carlsworth Caverns in Stony Middleton. One of the young soldiers, John Stevens, was a cocky 16-year-old kid, but was also a promising soldier in the English Army, and this trip to the cave was part of his training as well as the others. It was typical at this time to take these young soldiers into the cave as part of their training to give them experience and get them familiar with different terrains, as in battle the soldiers may have to enter the cave and should have the confidence to do so without hesitation. This training exercise was an initiative test. The soldiers were to find a through passage from their starting point point to an unknown exit and were equipped with only candles to light their way. The instructor led the soldiers into the cave by the Gin entrance. This is not the only entrance. In fact, there are over 70, but it is the most popular route into the Carlswerk Caverns. The entrance provides a small hole in the ground at the base of a wall face. Moving through the narrow entrance leads to a simple descent into the Iron Passage and on to the Oyster Room. The Oyster Room is a large chamber with oyster fossils on the ceiling. From here, a caver can continue to the left down the Iron Passage to the larger network of passages, or the caver can go through the right passage, which also eventually leads to the same network. However, this second route, known as the Stalactite Passage, is guarded by sumps. These sumps are low parts in the tunnel that are flooded, creating a submerged passageway. Sometimes these sumps are short enough for a caver to simply hold their breath and duck through. Other times they must hold their breath for extended periods and swim through. And of course, sometimes these sumps require scuba gear. The instructor led John and the others to the right, coming upon one of these sumps. As John was the strongest swimmer, the instructor ordered John to get down into the water and swim to the other side. He was very confident and he just said okay, got down into the water and began swimming. He didn't have a light or anything. He was just feeling his way through the cave in complete darkness. After a while, he became low on air. He hadn't yet reached the other side and there was no indication that he was getting close. So John turned around and swam back out of the tunnel to the instructor. When he got there, he told the instructor that it was too far and he didn't make it to the other side. The instructor simply told him that it was there. Catch your breath and give it another try. Many of the soldiers had been in this cave before and were adamant that they were in the wrong location. The instructor kept telling them that this sump was not very far and John could easily make it, but the instructor was insistent this was the correct location and John should try again. Again, John was confident. John was an extremely strong swimmer. In fact, every morning for exercise he would get up and he would swim. And he didn't just swim, but he would hold his breath and swim underwater. He could hold his breath and swim 2 lengths of the army swimming pool underwater without taking a breath. So he was confident that if other people could make it to the other side of this sump, then he could too. So he went back underwater and gave it another try. There he was again in total darkness, feeling his way through the submerged passage. He went faster this time, farther into the cave, but again running out of air, he turned back. Again, he surfaced on the side of the instructor. Out of breath, he again told the instructor that he couldn't make it to the other side. The other soldiers again reiterated that this was not the correct location. The instructor insisted now and changed his tone. He ordered the 16-year-old trainee to get back into the water and swim to the other side. So, John, feeling like there were no other options, took another deep breath, went underwater, and started swimming. This time, he swam as hard as he could for as long as he could. He still believed the instructor that there was an exit on the other side. So, when he started running low on air, instead of turning back this time, he continued, knowing that if he didn't reach the other side, he would drown. He kept going with his air running lower and lower until it was out and no exit. He scrambled looking for anything that would indicate that the end was near, and he found an air pocket on the ceiling. He pushed his head into the air pocket and took a deep breath. He was now in a tiny air pocket in complete darkness, away from anyone. It was completely silent and he had no idea where he was or how far he was from any exit. He could stay there a while, but eventually his air would run out. He just didn't know how long it would be. Back at the entrance, the instructor waited for several minutes. He eventually realized that John had either made it to the other side or had drowned, so he sent one of the other boys for help with the message that John had gotten lost. Back in the sump, John caught his breath and went back underwater to try and figure out which way was the exit, but he was turned around and confused. He couldn't make out which direction to go to get out, and now he didn't trust the instructor anymore. He thought if he went the wrong direction, he would end up drowning, so he waited in the cold, dark sump, hoping that help was coming. When the emergency crews were notified of the lost soldier, they enlisted the Derbyshire Cave Rescue Organization, including 28-year-old Dave Alsop. Dave Alsop was an experienced cave explorer and diver, and was very experienced in this particular cave. When Dave arrived on scene and found out where John had been lost, he immediately knew that he was recovering a body. Dave had been in that sump and knew that it required scuba gear to get across to the other side. However, he maintained hope and he and the rescuers began pumping water out of the sump to lower the level so they could enter. As the water level receded, the rescuers inched their way deeper and deeper into the cave. After 13 hours and 90 feet, they reached John. He was exhausted and cold, but alive. They couldn't believe it. Though there are no established records, it is believed that John's 90-foot free dive into a cave is the longest ever for anyone that survived. John was sent on a vacation while an inquiry took place. When John returned, he was transferred, and no known disciplinary action was taken. On May 3, 1975, 6 friends traveled to Knox Cave near Albany, New York. The group included Raymond and Suzanne Ryan, Glenn Bumpus, Jane Schiff, Michael Frocklick, and Anita Sonnen. They were novice cavers that were in their late teens and early 20s. The Ryans were the only members of the group with any caving experience. For the rest, it was their first cave. They arrived at the cave shortly before 8 o'clock in the evening when it was dark and cold. The group descended the sinkhole to the gate at the entrance. The entrance was partially covered by ice, but it was still a cold evening and there didn't seem to be much meltwater around. The ice felt secure. Furthermore, beyond the ice at the entrance gate, there didn't appear to be any more ice. The group did their due diligence to make sure that the cave was safe to enter. Upon confirming that everything looked good, one by one they began descending into the cave. They crawled over the ice to the metal ladder that took them down the near vertical shaft at the entrance. The Ryans led the group into the cave, while Glenn Bumpus and Jane Schiff waited outside. As the 4 cavers inside the shaft descended the large rocks to the main shaft, a huge rush of air shot down through the shaft, blowing the cavers with snow and small ice particles stinging their skin. They yelled up through the shaft to Glenn and Jane, but only heard back a low moan. The 4 friends scurried up the rocks and out of the cave to find a 4 feet thick, 8 feet diameter block of ice resting on top of Jane, with only Jane's legs sticking out from under the 2,000-pound block of ice. It was immediately clear that Glenn, laying next to Jane, was dead. But Jane was breathing. They had to focus on getting help as quickly as possible. They drove for help and had the local police and volunteer firefighters on the scene by 8:30. The emergency workers were able to break apart the ice block enough to free Jane's body. They rushed her to the local hospital, where it was found that she had fractured ribs, a fractured left arm, a punctured left lung, and a fractured 5th, 6th, and 7th vertebrae. Jane was in critical condition. At the beginning of the investigation, they couldn't determine where the ice block had come from until they noticed drag marks on the wall about 25 feet above the entrance. It was determined that the 2,000-pound block had fallen from the rim of the sinkhole. It was also determined that it was most likely covered by mud, making it impossible to discern from its surroundings before breaking off. The investigation determined that the accident had nothing to do with the cavers at that location. No warning signs were available to the group that might have made the accident avoidable, and no amount above the adequate supplies at hand would have made any difference. After about a week in critical care, Jane Schiff did recover. However, she was left without mobility in her lower extremities from the accident. After a legal battle with Schiff, the landowner cut off access to the cave and instructed the local authorities to arrest anyone trespassing. Since 1979, the cave has been owned by the Northeastern Cave Conservancy and has been operated by the Knox Cave Preserve in Albany County, New York. This is True Tragedies. Please like, leave comments, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.